friends, my name is Kim. Welcome to Healing Pilly's Cottage. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm so happy to have you with me today. Today we're going to make a recipe from the book All New Light Cooking. It's a diabetic friendly recipe, so let's go ahead and get started. The first ingredient is a large fennel bulb, but I am not a fan of fennel, so I am going to actually replace that with onion. Texturally, I think it will be similar, although flavor, I think, will be different. But I think that the recipe itself would work well with onion. So it suggests that we saute chopped fennel. So in this case, we're going to chop up our onion and saute that in a large skillet. And it suggests a large skillet because we're going to later on be adding our other ingredients, which include chicken broth, tomatoes, and white beans. Oh, it would be nice if I told you what the name of the recipe is. So the name of the recipe is Tuscan chicken with white beans. I thought that that would be a good recipe to try because it's not only high in protein and low in carbohydrates, but it's also high in fiber. And I'm someone that struggles to get enough fiber and enough protein, if I'm honest, into my diet. I'm not a huge meat eater. I have always loved carbohydrates far more than I love protein. We're going to go ahead and just put some olive oil in our skillet and wait for that to heat up before we add in our onion. Because my onion was large, I'm only going to use half of an onion. And as I mentioned, so this is Tuscan chicken with white beans. It does call for dark meat. It calls for 8 ounces of boneless, skinless chicken thighs cut into 3/4 inch pieces. I'm also not a fan of dark meat, so I'm going to use chicken breast. And I'm hopeful that you're going to see that it is so easy to interchange ingredients and never to be intimidated by what a recipe says. And when it calls for things that are either out of reach for you or things that you just don't like, I'm hopeful that I'm going to be able to show you that you can interchange the ingredients that you like and that you have available so that you can still make the recipe and it turn out phenomenally. So I'm going to go ahead and add my onion. Skillet's not quite hot enough yet. I've got that up on high. I do feel the heat, so we'll give it a minute. And while we're doing that, we can go ahead and start cutting up our chicken. I'm going to use a different cutting mat for that. And I'm also going to only use 2 chicken breasts, so 8 ounces of boneless skinless chicken. I'm not really sure how much 8 ounces would be. I guess that's a half a cup. So maybe I'll only use 1 chicken breast. So I am someone that is living with type 2 diabetes. I was diagnosed several years ago and I was able to manage my diabetes with medication for many years. And then it caught up with me. And without diet and exercise, my A1C went up to 13.9. And I was put on insulin. And I was put on 2 types of insulin, both slow acting and fast acting insulin. So my doctor said in order for her to manage my diabetes, I was going to need to show that I could do more than just allow the medication to try and do its job. And I really liked my doctor. So I decided 6 weeks ago that I would do just that. And I went to the doctor, and again, we're cutting these into 3/4 inch pieces. So I went to the doctor again on Friday, and she was pretty satisfied with me. My A1C went down from 13.9 to 8. And while it's not yet in range, that was a big improvement. And I'd also lost 5 more pounds during that time. So I was able to be taken off of the fast-acting sliding scale insulin that I was supposed to take 4 times a day. And that's a lot of finger pricks. My insurance didn't cover the meter that is constantly on you. So I have to continue to do the finger pricks and testing 4 times a day is a lot. So now my skillet is coming up, the heat is coming up on this. And we're supposed to saute either the fennel or in my case the onion for 5 minutes. So now that it's come up to where it needs to be, we'll give that about 5 minutes to become translucent. So when I decided that I was going to make a lifestyle change, I decided that I went and got a membership to the Y, and I started walking. And then I decided to look on YouTube for videos that were diabetic friendly. And I found a lot of content by dietitians. But I didn't find anybody, and this could be limited to my search ability, but I didn't find anybody that was like me, someone who was living with type 2 diabetes and trying to make lifestyle changes that, let's be honest, aren't fun. I love to eat fast food. I love to eat food even in my home that is fast. I love hot dogs. I love scalloped potatoes loaded with cheese. I love mac and cheese. I love tater tots. I love BLTs. I love all the easy foods that I grew up on, and those are the foods that I need to stay away from. So that becomes the thought of working a full day, and I work 4/10s, so I work 6 to 4 and oftentimes till 5. And that means having enough energy at the end of the day to cook a meal that's healthy. And it also means a lot more thoughtful grocery shopping. And so when I went to YouTube and I saw that there were not a lot of people that were like me, that were showing how to make meals and change their lifestyle, and like I said, I was very limited in my search. I looked for diabetic friendly recipes. And so I just thought to myself, well, why don't I share my journey with all of you? And so I started going to Goodwill and different thrift stores and buying cookbooks. And there are a lot of diet cookbooks on the shelf at Goodwill, let me tell you. No one seems to be beating down the door to get the diet-friendly cookbooks. So I found at this point, because I've been looking for about 5 weeks, I found over 100 different cookbooks that are either diabetic or low-carb or diet books in general that include with it the nutrition elements so that I can see how many carbs are in each recipe. Some are low-fat cookbooks, although you have to be careful with low-fat cookbooks because those tend to reduce the fat and increase the sugar. And that's what we as diabetics, or I as a diabetic, or you as someone who is choosing to live a low carb lifestyle, would want to stay away from. So at this point, we've got our onions pretty much translucent, and we want to sprinkle our chicken with crushed rosemary. It says about a teaspoon. I'm going to go ahead and crush this in my fingers with my hand that hasn't touched the chicken. And then it says a teaspoon, but rosemary is a very strong flavor, so, and I'm only using one chicken breast, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. And then also a half a teaspoon of black pepper. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It doesn't call for any salt. This is not a cookbook. This is a cookbook that is looking for healthy ways to fix meals from all areas, including heart healthy. So that's why I'm assuming that it's removed the salt. I'm going to go ahead and put some salt on. Not that I'm not trying to be heart healthy, but that salt intake and my blood pressure aren't a concern for me. So I'm going to go ahead and add my chicken to the pot. And I'm going to wash my hands really quick. So this says that we need to stir and cook our chicken for 2 minutes. Assuming that's to get it brown. It's doing a great job. Like I said, this is a great book, the all-new Light Cooking Cookbook. It is, as you can see, I've already gone through it, and I've placed tabs everywhere that there's a recipe that I think that I would like. And I'm encouraged by the fact that there were so many recipes in this book that met the carbohydrate requirements for someone with type 2 diabetes. And let me just preface this by saying I am not a dietitian, I am not a doctor, and I have only done my own research online. But what I can see is that we want to stay between 30 and 45 carbohydrates per meal. And that's without removing for dietary fibers. So I don't know if you're familiar with the process of, if you have 45 carbs in a meal, or let's say 40 carbs because that makes the math easier for me. You have 40 carbs in your meal and 7 carbohydrates. That would bring you down to a 33 net carbs. So they're saying stay between 30 and 45 without removing the dietary fiber numbers. This is really looking good. I can smell the rosemary. The onions smell great. So as I mentioned, this cookbook has a lot of recipes that stay within that 30 to 45 carbohydrates per meal. We're going to go ahead and prep our next ingredients. They include a 14.5-ounce can of chicken broth. Again, the recipe called for low sodium chicken broth. I don't have that. That's not what I have on hand. There has to be a trick to making this can opener work that I haven't figured out yet. There we go. So it says after you've sauteed your chicken for 2 minutes, you want to add your chicken broth. So as I mentioned, a 14.5-ounce can of chicken broth. And I will leave the recipe in the description box below the video. So go ahead and add that. And then you also want to include a 14.5-ounce can of tomatoes. It called for stewed tomatoes. I had fire roasted tomatoes on hand, so that's what I'm using. It does not call for draining your tomatoes. Go ahead and add that. And it says that we're going to bring this to a boil. So we'll give it a minute and then combine these ingredients. I hope the camera is set up so that you can see this. It's starting to look beautiful. And then once we have done that, it's telling us that we need to cover and let it simmer for 10 minutes. So I'm going to get a lid. I'm going to go ahead and get the lid ready. And I'm going to go ahead and prep my beans. So after we've covered it and let it simmer for 10 minutes, we're to add a 14.5-ounce can of cannellini beans, but we need to drain and rinse these. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. This has come up to a, well, it's come up to a good simmer, not a boil. I'm going to go ahead and cover it so that it starts that process a little quicker. If you're not aware, if you cover something, it'll help bring it to a boil faster. I'm just going to watch it to make sure that I can put the temperature down once it does bring it to a boil. But so if you're someone who doesn't have cannellini beans available to you and you want to use what's in your pantry and you have navy beans or Great Northern beans, both of those would be good choices, I think, for this recipe. Once this has simmered for 10 minutes, we're going to go ahead and stir in those beans and cook for another 15 minutes or until the chicken is cooked through. We have just a couple minutes left, and I don't see this sauce really thickening. I mean, it may be a little bit thicker, but it's not a lot thicker. So I grabbed my cornstarch, and we're going to go ahead and make a slurry. And that's just a fancy term for a thickener. You take cornstarch and cold water. I was just looking to see if there was an official way to open this, because I am notorious for ignoring how I'm supposed to open something and opening it however I choose. So go ahead and add a little bit of cornstarch in there. I don't think it'll take much. Like I said, this could be thickening and I just not notice it. And I'll go ahead and add a little bit of cold water. I'd say probably an equal amount of a 1-to-1 cornstarch and water. And we'll go ahead and get all the lumps out of it. Add that right in. And stir it around. It does its job pretty quickly. This is already thicker. So I'll tell you what the nutrition facts are for this recipe. So for this Tuscan chicken with white beans, there are only 215 calories in a serving. So this makes 4 servings, only 215 calories per serving. 6 grams of fat, so not high in fat. Carbohydrates are 24, so those are definitely well below our 30 to 45 before we remove the dietary fiber. There's 7 grams of fiber. So I know we're not supposed to remove that for counting of our carbohydrates, but if you take the 24 minus 7, that is what, 17? So only 17 grams of net carbs. So at this point it says in the recipe to season to taste with hot sauce. I am not someone who likes a lot of heat. I'm going to just use this, and I'll probably pronounce it wrong, but Cholula sauce. And I'll add just a little bit and mix that up. And it says ladle into a bowl. So we'll go ahead and do that. I want to make sure I really mix that up because I don't want to get the bite that I try on camera to be so full of hot sauce that I make a face. I should have mentioned too that I am not I'm not someone who's easy to please when it comes to foods. I'm pretty picky. And I think that makes it even more tricky for me to find foods that I really like, that are healthy. So I'm going to go ahead and I probably needed a spoon for this. Let me go ahead and get a spoon. So I'll make sure that I have a little bit of everything in my spoonful. There's a part of me that was just thinking this would have been really good with some potatoes in it. And that, my friends, is why I'm a type 2 diabetic. Not that we can't eat potatoes. This is really good. And I imagine that it's going to be very filling. I could have used more rosemary, so I was cautious on the rosemary, and I can tell that it has rosemary in it, but only slightly. The overpowering flavor, if there is an overpowering flavor, it probably tastes most like tomatoes, although the tomatoes are mellowed out by the chicken broth. The chicken is very tender, so I imagine if you did follow the recipe exactly and you use chicken thighs, that it would be even more tender. There's nothing that I would change. I think it did need the salt that I added. And I do get a little bit of a kick from that. Like I said, I know that was only a little bit of hot sauce, but I am very sensitive to hot and heat. So there's a little bit of a kick. So if you like hot sauce, you could add more to it, and that would be a delightful taste. My instinct, of course, is to serve this with some bread. And technically, because we're only at 24 carbohydrates, we could find a bread that is under the amount that would allow us to have bread with this meal. One thing that I decided to do, so I mentioned that it has 17 grams of protein, 7 grams of fiber, 24 grams of carbohydrates, 6 grams of fat, and only 215 calories. And I did go ahead and determine what the costs were for this. So I did not have rosemary on hand in my pantry, so that was the highest expense for me at $4.99. But now I have rosemary that I can use over and over and over again because it filled my spice jar, with that much. And like I mentioned earlier, a little rosemary goes a long way. The chicken I got on sale for $3.79. I only used 1 chicken breast since it only called for 8 ounces. I used 1 onion, I used a half an onion, which is about $1. The broth was 79 cents. I used store brand chicken broth, and I had that on hand, but I checked my receipt from when I had made my grocery order. I do all of my grocery orders online. So I checked my receipt, it was 79 cents. My tomatoes were on sale for $2, but I bought a name brand of the tomatoes. And the beans, I bought store brand, and that was 79 cents. So total for the entire meal was $13.36, which I don't think you can beat, especially when $5 of that was strictly the rosemary, which we'll reuse over and over again. So I hope that you like this video. I hope that you find it valuable, because I really have a desire to continue making content like this and let you follow my journey to wellness, and we can do this journey together. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel, Healing Place Cottage, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.